What's up everyone, this is John with Skate Better, and today we are doing the April deck review. So I picked up this April deck a while ago, and I was really excited to give it a shot because their team is amazing. I actually think their graphics are sick, so I really wanted to give them a shot and see what it was all about, and I'm so glad that I did because this deck was amazing. I can't wait to get into it. Start off with the measurements of this deck. So this deck is 838 in width by 31.12 in length and has a wheelbase of 14.395. So just under 14 and a half wheelbase. 31.12 length, it's basically a 31 in length. And I don't think I've ever skated a deck this short before, other than maybe the primitive that I was skating, which I will compare this to. It did feel very nuggety, and with the Thunders, it felt perfect. It was like the perfect sweet spot, and I absolutely loved it. Just know that it is a compact shape, so things like tray flips, stuff like that, is gonna be good to go. I'm gonna talk about the shape of this deck next. So the pitch of this deck, I'd say, was slightly above average. The average was a 5. I'd put it at like a 6, like a solid 6. It very much reminded me of the Weekend deck, which is one of my favorite decks, and the Primitive deck because it was nuggety. It had pretty steep kick and tail, nose and tail, and then sort of like a mellow to like slightly more average concave. I would give the concave like a solid 6 as well, maybe actually a 6.5. I think it's a little bit higher than the pitch's average, but let me show you some other decks to compare it to. All right, so first I'm gonna compare it to this Weekend deck. So one of my favorite decks that I've ever skated, and you can see the Weekend deck is a little bit flatter and concave. So it's a little bit straighter here, and then the April has a little bit more of a dip, sort of like in this area over here. Actually a little bit easier to see in the tail. So the pitch, I think on the April is a little bit more, and the pitch on the Weekend looks a little bit more mellow. Could also just be the concave, but in general, the April's a little bit steeper, tiniest bit more concave than the Weekend. And then just real quick, comparing it to the Primitive deck, we put this on top. It is almost a perfect matchup. So the pitch, very, very similar. Wheelbase, very similar. Even the length, it looks like it's almost the same length, maybe a tad bit longer, but it's also on top. And then you can see the concaves are almost identical. So I did say the concave of this Primitive, I gave it like a 6.5, I think, maybe a 7. So yeah, it's like right in between a Primitive and a Weekend, and it was just like the sweet spot. I felt like it had just enough concave to where I could catch it on my flick foot. And then it was flat enough to where I was setting up for shove-its, pop tricks, regular ollies, 180s, where I felt like my foot was stable and I wasn't worried about, all this waviness going on the boards. But overall, personal preference, it was pretty much spot on the money. So next we're gonna do the nose and the tail shape. This deck had a pretty popsicle-y nose and a pretty popsicle-y tail. It's not a shovel in the sense like the Passport or the Quasi or the Hockey where it was like really flat across here. It's more of like a natural popsicle, and I find that I actually prefer the popsicle to the shovel. Shovel would be my second over like a regular deck. I'm gonna show you compared to the Primitive first. It's like the Primitive was a little bit fuller, tiniest bit fuller near the top, and the April has a little bit more taper, but I'm telling you, you don't even really notice it that much. Then here's compared to the Weekend nose, so you can just see, and then these are almost identical. It's crazy. Even the amount of space between the flat, so like where the bolts go and this starts to curve, it's like almost identical. So very, very similar to the Weekend shape. And then for the tail shape, I would say it's a little bit more, the Primitive tail is definitely a little bit more full. So same thing, the April, this might be a little bit easier to see. The Primitive has a little bit more of a fuller tail shape compared with the Weekend deck. Once again, it is pretty spot on. It's almost identical in shape. For the durability and pop of this deck, I was also very, very impressed. I've definitely zooted this deck out, put it into walls, slipped out a bunch of times, and the nose and tail are in fantastic shape. There's like no chips, no nothing. I'm not saying that if you ding it into the right thing, it's just not gonna chip. Like I'm sure it will, but it just feels really sturdy and also light, and at the same time has a good amount of pop. Like pop on this deck, I'd give it like 8.5, I'd say, and it was just consistent pretty much the entire time. And then once it started to give off, it like really kind of died down. It does have a good amount of pop left in it. I'd say like even right now I'm riding, it's got like a 5 to 6 out of 10. I could still skate this deck for another 2 weeks and it would totally be fine. Pop wise, solid 8.5 out of 10. Like one of the best pops. And when I say pop, I'm not just talking about like wheelbase, pitch, Teo, like to the ground. I'm talking about like, what's the snappiness of the wood? And then yes, like how high am I getting it off the ground due to like the weight of the deck? Durability, I'm giving it a solid 8.5. Pop, I'm also giving it a solid 8.5. I would almost even go with a 9 on both to compare to every other deck I've skated. It was pretty much better than almost all of them, except maybe the Weekend, but the Primitive also, but it just didn't hold up as well. It's just so solid. Like I can't say enough good things about this deck, I feel like. General pros and cons, I don't think there's much to say. If you like nugget compact shaped decks and you do a lot of street skating, I think this is going to be a fantastic deck. I think you're really going to like your experience. I feel like I have a lot of control when I'm skating this deck. I think because the way the concave and the pitch is shaped, it just is allowing for that control. Also the wheelbase, because the wheelbase is a little bit out, but then it's such a nuggety shaped deck, it just feels like no matter where I have my foot on the board, I can get to the end of the board, if that makes any sense, like really quickly. So it helps with a lot of tricks, and almost all my tricks felt so natural. And I think you can tell like when you step on a board and just like tricks start working for you, and just like everything works. For me, this is that deck. And then I stand behind the durability and the pop as well. And the graphics. I think they're great decks. I don't know how expensive they are. I think this one was like 60 bucks. Got it on Tactics, 65, something like that. Totally worth it. I think you're gonna have a great time, and I'll leave my thoughts there. Would I buy another April deck again? I think hands down the answer is yes. Support Shane O'Neill, pick yourself up an April deck, or at least if you want to try it, I would say go for it. You're probably gonna have a good time. At least that was my experience. Thank you all so much for sticking around the channel. I will be doing the OG Spitfire Classic review next, but that's it for today. Take care. See y'all next time.